Hi, my name's Derek, and in this Avoka video executive summary, we'll be looking at electronic forms, a better way of collecting information. We'll start with a quick introduction, and then show you some of the things that are possible with electronic forms delivered by Avoka and Adobe Lifecycle. I think you'll be surprised at what's possible. So, why is it that large organizations in the public and private sector can build wonderful websites, but when the customer wants to apply for products or services, request information, or transact in any way, more often than not, we're presented with a form to be printed, filled with a pen, and mailed or faxed? So it seems we're able to discover information online, but so often we can't subsequently transact online. Now, this isn't just a point of frustration for the customer. The organizations receiving and processing these forms should already know that paper form processing is costly. For example, for every dollar spent producing paper forms, over $30 is spent processing paper forms. In financial services, for example, 38% of applications for products such as credit cards and insurance arrive with incorrect or missing information. And organizations lose paper documents at a rate of about 25%. So paper is a lose-lose situation for both the customer and the company. And when you consider that 85% of all business processes start with a form, we realize the problem is really significant. Historically, organizations have tackled this problem by creating web pages for data capture as electronic forms. But these forms are developed by programmers at significant cost and risk and typically take weeks or months, not the days the business user is expecting. And even if these forms are created and the customer has the right browser and operating system for the forms to work, I think we've all had the experience of putting a lot of time and information into an online form to subsequently lose all that information because of a lost internet connection, failed laptop battery, or accidentally hitting the browser back button, which results in people resorting back to paper forms. Thankfully, there are alternatives. Some organizations are now successfully deploying specific electronic forms technologies such as Adobe Lifecycle Forms, and it's working. The trick is to have the IT team put in place a platform such as Adobe Lifecycle, along with Avoka SmartForms Suite, that can be used by the business team to create, deploy, and manage their electronic forms and make them accessible to customers. But enough chat. Let's see some electronic forms in action. So here's an example of a smart form, and in this case it's a claim form. I've got useful little help buttons in line with the sections of the form that they relate to, which when I click provide me with some detailed help. As I make selections in the form, other sections that are relevant to those selections subsequently appear, so we've got this dynamic behavior inside of the form. As you'd expect, I can incorporate things like drop-down lists, fields that I can enter information into, and again, the dynamic behavior of the form can be in individual small sections of the form, such as if I've been known by another name and I select yes, it'll show me the fields of information for that. Select no. And the small red asterisk here indicates that these fields are mandatory, and we'll show what that means a little bit later on. So I'm going to skip over some sections of this form, move to the next line, and show you some of the validation. So if I put in something that is obviously an invalid entry for a phone number, I'm presented with an error message informing me of the incorrect information. So let's just go back here, fill it in, and the same applies to something like an email address. And the same applies to something like an email address. Now that's an invalid email entry, so when I leave, the validation stops me. It says we'd like to get a correct email formatted address, and we can move on. We've also got small information sections, such as if I want to know the difference between a primary victim and a secondary victim, I can click this little information button and it'll pop up some help. So we've skipped over a lot of sections of the form, but that'll be controlled a little bit later on. So I'm going to jump to this injury selector. Now, in this case, rather than describing the injuries that were sustained, I can click on sections of the form, such as during the incident, my shoulder was dislocated and my arm radius was fractured. Now, these selections I've made are subsequently used to populate the injuries claimed table. Now, if I move to the end of the form, because this form is a PDF, I've got the option of saving the form with the information I've entered and take it offline. I can save it to my computer, I can email it to my lawyer or my wife, get some additional information put in. We can collaborate on this form as if it was a piece of paper, but with all the benefits of an electronic form. Or if I'm in a hurry and I think, yep, let's just try and submit this as it is, the error section of the form appears telling me what mistakes I've made and what things I need to correct before the form can be successfully submitted. So by simply double clicking on one of these items, it will take me into that section of the form, and all the fields that have errors have been highlighted in red, ensuring that when I do finally submit this form, it'll be ready for processing. Okay, so let's have a look at a different type of claim. In this case, I'm logging in and I'm going to make a claim against my vehicle insurance. So I'm going to click on the link to report a claim, and I'm taken into a different type of electronic form. This is a guided form experience delivered through the Adobe Flash Player. Now, because I've logged in, it's already pre-populated the form with some information about me. And as I continue through the sections of the form, I get this nice transition effect from page to page, which allows me to feel comfortable that I know exactly where I've been and where I'm going in the form. Now, I can always click back through the sections of the form to return to a previous part. So all of that information looks fine. I'm going to describe the vehicle. Now, it's pre-populated the drop-down list with cars that I've already registered against my policy, but in this case, it was a rental car that I was using. So I'm going to specify the details of the rental that we had in this case. The year was 2006 and it was grey. It wasn't owned by me, it was owned by my car company. And if we were so informed, we could enter a VIN number and continue on to the next section. Now the interactivity of this type of form really comes into play. Rather than trying to describe the damage that occurred on the vehicle, I can simply click on the diagram of the vehicle and specify the type of damage that was received. Similarly, instead of trying to describe how the accident occurred, I can drag these shapes around the diagram, specify exactly where the crash occurred, and submit the form. Now, if I needed to enter more information, because of the interoperability of the Adobe technology for forms, be they Flash or PDF, I could click on the PDF icon and take this form offline, complete it at a later date as a PDF on my desktop, and then submit it back into the process. So hopefully that's given you some indication of the kind of forms that can be delivered as Adobe Lifecycle forms to improve the quality of your data collection.